I'm going to ask you both a question, which I started to ask the guests after you'd both been on. And that question is, and I'll start with you, Paul, is what have you changed your mind on in the course of your life? And what was it that made you think differently?
I think for me, it's very much a generational question because I was a politically precocious 14-year-old when Margaret Thatcher came to power. I was very struck by the sad state of the nation when I was at that age. And I thought I wished her well in what she was doing. And I still believe what she did was absolutely essential. And as a result of that, I suppose I went through a kind of libertarian, I was never a sort of fanatical libertarian, but I did think the small state would be the best solution. And I also thought that a very small state would emerge. People got more educated and wealthier. They would want to take more responsibility for themselves, and the state would kind of wither in a way. And that would be a good thing. And I've realized that was wrong. I think a lot of people of my generation have realized that, and others have still hold those prejudices. That's not to say I don't think free markets and so on are very important for the economy. But I do think that we need some kind of leadership, if you like, at the cultural level, at the national level. You can't just leave everything to the market. And that you do need institutions that set a gold standard of excellence. And, you talked about the BBC back in the 70s. I would add to that Brian McGee's series on philosophy, which is all available on YouTube. That's fantastic. And I think, if you just leave it to the market, you will end up with excellent stuff. There will be really good things out there for a small number of people. But I think society and culture needs a guiding hand. So I suppose I've become a bit more paternalistic in my cultural attitudes. And maybe that's a little bit what's behind this podcast.
Interesting. I think that call is growing amongst the Zoomers, and you might have come across him, but previous guest, Charlie Downs, who's only 23, very, very adept with delivering messages. Very of his age, he's able to get quite a lot of content in and feeling it in a short period of time. But he has conservative inclinations, but ultimately believes that having seen the cultural elite and the various institutions be taken over by this socially left-leaning, economically right-leaning worldview, he said, look, conservatism's not going to cut it. We actually need to have some kind of a counter-revolution. It's very Christopher Rufo, the American chap who wrote about this stuff, which is if you want to have cultural change in the direction towards maintaining anything from the past, then you're going to have to employ similar tactics. Now, I know that's not the point necessarily you're making, Paul, but you can see this growing sentiment about maybe we do need some paternalism to retain things of value, even if it isn't, valuable on a spreadsheet, as it were.
And I see it in demography as well. So, I would not have, and I think fewer people thought about pronatalism, but I would have thought, well, the market will sort it out. Now, I strongly believe that we need government and state-led. It's not the only thing, but it needs to be cultural and it needs to be financial. But I think our demographic woes need to be taken in hand by the establishment. We can't just let the thing drift and assume that somehow the hidden hand will sort it all out.
Podcast in itself. Ed, what about you? What previously was something you thought this is a good thing, or this is something I believe is set in stone, but then over time you changed your mind about?
I think I changed my mind quite a lot. Maybe too much on a lot of things. I mean, you mentioned grammar schools as one thing, for example. I used to be pro. Now I'm quite anti. I do think one of the fundamental problems we have with the meritocracy. I'm pro meritocracy in the sense that it's the least bad way of ordering society. But I think the decline of local elites has been a big factor in a lot of the social problems, and that when you take away the kind of top 10% of any group or any town or anything like that, the rest kind of falls to pieces a little bit. And I think grammar schools kind of mirror that a little bit. I think there's obviously people feel very great gratitude for their own experiences and again education, and it's helped to kind of sort society along kind of levels of education and intelligence. But the downsides of that have become quite apparent as well. I think there needs to be some way of making making failure less brutal. Reading a couple of years ago Michael Young's book about meritocracy, the idea that if in a kind of free and liberal society, if you don't succeed and you fail, it's all the more crushing for you than it is in a kind of more kind of stultified society, because you know your place and you might not be happy about it, but you accept it. While in ours, the kind of cost of failure, especially for kind of low status men, is very, very crushing indeed. I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to in some ways a more paternalistic society, but I don't know. I mean, I'm a bit of a doomer in some sense, and I think a lot of these problems are they're just intractable. They're just the way it is. It's with like the loss of manufacturing jobs. There's just no way. It's sad that it happened. I just can't see, if industries aren't making a profit compared to competition from elsewhere, there's almost nothing we can do about it. Stuff with like the birth rate thing, I've become, maybe it's the Morland influence in me, but I know Paul Morland's, Paul, your latest book is about trying to reverse it, but the more I look at the data, I just think there's just nothing that anyone's doing that's really going to reverse it. All the sort of Central European countries, they're all, Poland's now at the absolute basement level of fertility, and I just wonder if that's just the price for a free liberal society. People have different options, and lots of people are choosing not to have kids. In many cases, they're choosing lifestyles which make it much harder for them to have children even if they want to. Just as the opportunities provided by technology just means more people want to watch rubbish TV or look at TikTok reels.
So what you change your mind on, Ed, is reasons for pessimism, right?
Right. Yeah, I think that kind of unsolvable. I mean, there's lots that's great, and I would never want to live in a past time, even if there are much to benefit. The overall technological improvements are so much greater that it's worth. So much of our problems are just to do with choice and abundance, and those are kind of those are good problems, rather than the problems that a lot of people have in the world, which are to do with hunger and political instability
and high infant mortality rates.
High infant mortality and dentistry. Those two things that just make it. There's no competition between today and the past. A lot of things is that a lot of people are just not well suited to the lifestyle we now have. It makes them too anxious, and that is obviously a problem. But again, it's a kind of good problem. Anxiety levels increase as society gets better. People, who are having to struggle to survive the very safe survival of their children don't suffer from anxiety, existential despair, because they have other things to worry about. So, yeah, these just things that happen. There's not really much we can do about them except sort of tape around the edges. I mean, I hope there is a sort of a reversal of the fertility crisis, but I just don't see it around me anymore.